I'm very pleased to be joined today by Trevanna Cooper, Teacher Librarian at CBC Fremantle in Western Australia. Trevanna will be sharing her experience about implementing LearnPath at her school. Trevanna, thanks for joining us. Why don't you start by giving us a little bit of background about yourself and your school?
Thanks, Joel. CBC is 137 years old and it's a boys' college, and I absolutely love working here. One of the consequences of it being such an old place is I also get to look after the archives. We haven't got an archivist at the moment, so I do my little bit here and there as I've got time, but it's quite fascinating. We've got about 400 students a day through our library. We're a very busy library, and that's not counting during lesson times. We're very innovative. In fact, we're called the Idea Shop. We run workshops, radio station, and book trailers, photos, advertisements on the TV. And that includes how to study ads that we've made ourselves. And we run this all on a weekly basis. We're also the go-to people for any students that need assistance. And I think one of the reasons I love working here is because there's always a new challenge. And the school is very accommodating about giving us the permission and at times the finance to take up the new challenges. There's 3 of us working here in the library. There's myself, the TL, and I also run the reading program. There's a library aide and a multimedia technician. But LearnPath, like the radio station, is the responsibility of myself, the teacher librarian.
Okay, thanks, Trevanna. And when did you implement LearnPath at CBC?
We started about the middle of last year. So during last year, I aimed at trying to get the Year 7 programs all on LearnPath during Term 3 and Term 4. This year I've been on leave, so I came later to work than everyone else. And so what I've done this year is I've just started in the last 2 or 3 weeks putting the Year 7 programs on for this year, for Term 1.
Great. And what role does LearnPath play at your school?
Well, it was interesting how I came to be to take up LearnPath. I was talking to our academic care teachers, and they were saying how difficult it was for these kids who have learning disabilities to actually get their head around topics. They really found great difficulty in breaking it down. At about the same time, I think, I was talking to one of our science teachers, and he was saying that the young kids today, they don't seem to have a great deal of difficulty finding things on the internet. And his kids in his class would all find the material, but then they'd often find, especially the Year 7s and 8s, they'd find it at a level that they couldn't possibly understand. And they'd write things in their assignments, and he said he'd look at them and say, well, hey, you know, this is your Year 10 or 11 stuff. They're finding the material, they're putting it together, but they haven't got a clue what they're writing down. So I thought, given these 2 things, I thought, you know, maybe LearnPath can play a part in breaking the topic down into bite-sized pieces to help the kids who struggle with that. And also, I could find some websites and videos that were at the right level so that if kids wanted to look for something, they'd find something that they could understand. And another problem we've encountered is that there's so much material to be covered in the curriculum that teachers are struggling to find the time to give them research time. And a lot of it's done at home, and quite often, especially with things like science, the parents don't know enough about it to be able to give them that assistance. So I suppose all of these things together made me try LearnPath to see if I could make it quicker and easier for students to access the information they needed and at their level. And it was something I wanted to make less overwhelming for the younger kids.
Okay. And how did you find getting started with LearnPath? Were there any difficulties? How did you overcome those difficulties?
I think the main difficulty for me was getting the programs out of the teachers, so I could break them down into topics. Everybody's very busy. That's a reality in a high school. And I sort of thought about, how am I going to do this? Because you can put out the request and nothing happens, and then you're halfway through the term and you're still waiting. So I thought what I'd do was I'd wait till teachers initially came into the library, and I'd actually, by that stage, put things into LearnPath that their class would find useful. And then I went over to the teacher and I demonstrated. And I found that really generated a lot of enthusiasm. And I showed it to the kids in that class then, because the teacher would say, oh, show the kids. And then the kids would start using it immediately. It's pretty easy to use, and it's pretty easy to sort of create things in LearnPath. But I did get stuck a couple of times, and I have to say the Softlink support was excellent and very, very prompt in getting back to me.
Great, well that's good to hear. And so how about engagement with staff? How did you go about getting that?
Well, I think I only had to show them really, show teachers and students of years 7, 8 and 9 what resources I'd found, and how having them all in one place made their life easier. I just stopped teachers whenever they came into the library and showed them, and words suddenly started to get around. I think I have to keep reminding them at the beginning of each term that I've put resources in that address their program. It's just, that's just ongoing, because as I said, everybody's very busy, and the last thing in their head is about what the library's doing. You have to keep bringing it to their attention. But when they're up here, they do use it.
Okay, and when you're creating a new guide, do you have a general process for that?
Well, I look at the topic, I get the programs and I go through them. One of the reasons I'm doing this, I must say, is I remembered helping a Year 12 student a couple of years ago, and he was having difficulty in understanding his textbook. And I took him to the library shelf and found another book on the same topic that packaged the information in a slightly different way and slightly easier language, and he got the concept immediately. So sometimes kids do need to look at various information in different sources that address the same topic, because sometimes they can find it easier. So this is where I see the benefit of LearnPath, in that it can present things in an easier way that perhaps kids can find it easy to get their head around. So I look at the topics, on the weekly topics that they're studying, and I break it down as if I was a student trying to understand it. And then I look for resources that explain topics at that year level. I search for a web page usually that has a clear explanation of the topic and load that page so their search is spot on what they need. And this ensures success, particularly with the kids that struggle. I also find at least one YouTube clip that explains the topic or the concept. I also look for storyboards, posters or animations, and that's important. That's a very important thing to do as well, because some kids, especially in boys, are visual learners. And if you can put something like that in there, they'll get their head around the topic much more quickly. And the other tip that's really important is any pictures, posters or storyboards that I use are free images. When I go to search for them, I always type free image, so I haven't got to worry about the copyright.
Great. And so do you have any other tricks that you figured out that, that people might not have thought of?
One of the things I struggled with that I didn't get initially was how to create a slider. So what I do is I'll put in a bit of YouTube and I'll put in a web page, but I'll also create a book slider. So if I've got books on the topic in the library that's at their level, I'll put them in the book slider, or DVDs, whichever. But one of the things I didn't realise was that to create a slider you have to have a heading in your catalogue records under lists. So where you'd normally create your reading list, you put a heading that you can use for your slider in LearnPath. And I make it like the topic I'm searching for. So the Year 7 topic, what are forces? That was the section in their program, what are forces? So what I did was in that lists field, I wrote Year 7, what are forces? Exactly the same as the topic. So when I'm looking for it, I can find it very easily when I'm creating things. Another thing another trick, which I didn't know and I was told about, was sometimes when you add a poster or you add a web page, you can sometimes get it like a grey background. I add a photo for them to click on and I can get a grey background, but there is a trick where you can get rid of that. So I've learnt to do that as well.
Fantastic. And so do you have a design philosophy when you're creating a LearnPath guide?
I just keep it basic. I do a red heading background for film, aqua for website, yellow for books in the library slider. I did change that for the Year 8 religion assessment because it was more viable to use 3 different colours to donate the 3 main religions. So I just use that in that incident, but normally I stick with the red for the film and the aqua for the website and the yellow for the books, because the kids get used to that and then they go to the page and they know immediately by looking at the colour of the heading background what it is.
And what has been the response to LearnPath from students and staff?
The boys who've used it have loved it, especially the boys who were doing the big RE assessment. They said they finished it a lot quicker and more easily than they thought they could. They like the visual images and the packaging, and it helps them identify how the topic is broken down. I think that's one of the big benefits. You can see straight away with the headings how this topic that they can't get their head around, they suddenly see it spread out and broken down. And that's a really big benefit.
What has been the most positive outcome from implementing LearnPath at the school?
I think it really reduces the anxiety level of the students who are using it. I think quite a lot of stress results from lack of time to do an assignment well. And I mean, life in a school just gets busier and busier. I think the other thing it does is it takes the stress off parents who want to help but probably don't know a lot about the topic. And the other thing I think which is very good, well, 2 things really. It helps the students feel a degree of mastery over their work. It becomes something that they look at and say, yes, I can do this. And it also reinforces what they've learned in class. And we talked about repackaging the information in an easier format. I think it's a wonderful way to reinforce something that may have been said in class, but perhaps they didn't quite get their head around the first time.
And from your experience implementing LearnPath, have there been any difficulties or learning experiences that you think others may benefit from hearing about?
Well, it was a lot of work to enter all the information for the first time. I mean, there's no arguing with that. It certainly is. I mean, last year in term 3, I spent a few weeks entering all the materials for the Year 7 HASS, English, Science and Religion. But this year, most of the program will be the same. So when I come to term 3, it'll just be a case of making sure that the links still work and updating any of the topics that may have changed. Once I get all 4 terms programs, which I'll gradually do over the year, and get them entered, then it'll just be maintenance after that. And I don't think you have to start with everything at once. I think you target the most needy classes or the ones that have requested things. And gradually you build it up. We're all busy. I understand that. I'm extremely busy here. But at the same time, you can do a little, and gradually that little builds. Sometimes teachers have got their own resources they like you to use, and you can add them too if they provide the hyperlink, which saves you searching for it. The only thing I'm going to say as a tip, use the same language in your headings that is used in the program. I talked about using the heading what are forces. If the topic presented to the kids is what are forces, then your heading for the video or web page should be what are forces. Because what it does is the kids identify it straight away as something that they need.
Great. Well, thanks, Trevanna, for sharing your insights with everyone today.
You're very welcome. I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it too and using the program.
Fantastic. Well, we really appreciate your time.